Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to this ChemCareers webinar. This afternoon we are looking at the topic of CChem and more importantly how CChem shaped my career. So my name is Laura Woodward. I'm going to be chairing this session this afternoon. I'm one of the career and professional development advisors at the Royal Society of Chemistry. I'm going to get each of the panel to introduce themselves and then we'll get into the details of the webinar. As we go through, if you want to type in any questions, please feel free to do so. I'll be sort of capturing those at the end and putting some of those to the panel towards the end of the session. So anything you sort of think of, if you want to type those in, please feel free to do so. So without further ado, I'm going to pass through to each of the panel members and get them to quickly introduce themselves. So Janelle, if you want to start.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janelle Harvey and I work for the Royal Society of Chemistry, helping to support our members with chartership.
And Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah. I work at the FRSC as the Careers Executive, so I work on skills and professional development.
And Rebecca?
My name's Rebecca Ballantyne. I'm a Senior Technologist and Chartered Chemist working at Sellafield Limited.
And William? Oh, William, are you there?
Sorry, struggling to mute there.
That's all right.
Hi, I'm Will Goundry. I'm a Principal Scientist and a Chartered Chemist working at AstraZeneca.
Brilliant, thank you. So just before we get into the presentation, I'm going to just launch a quick poll and ask you all just to quickly answer the question, very simple question, which is, are you a Chartered Chemist? I'm just launching that, so that will just give us an idea of who's listening in today. Okay. Thank you. So I don't know if the rest of the panel can see that, but 92% of those listening today are not currently chartered. So hopefully that will help you in terms of your answers and your presentation. So like I said, to start with, we're going to run through a few things about Chartered Chemist, talking about skills development. We talk a little bit about the process of applying, and then Rebecca and William are going to share their experiences of how it's helped them shape their career and sort of thinking about their own sort of professional development activities as well. So Janelle, shall I pass to you and you can go through your presentation?
Yes, thank you very much, Laura. We work with many of our members, helping them on the path to gain Chartered Chemist status. And I wanted to start the beginning of this webinar with a brief overview of what Chartered Chemist status is and how you might be able to use it. What we won't cover are the particulars around applying and the process involves things like what evidence should you use. We already have a wide variety of other webinars and resources on our website, and you can see the short bit.ly link at the bottom of this slide here. So if you want to find out more about actually how to fill out the forms and what you need to write on them, please go there and read all of our resources and watch our webinars. Chartered Chemist, what is it? Well, for 92% of you who aren't a Chartered Chemist, you might be wondering, so hopefully this slide will help. It is our highest award that recognises the demonstration of key professional skills. And more importantly, this award isn't just about your technical knowledge. In fact, it covers more areas, such as the application of your knowledge and how you develop it, your professional impact, communication and influencing skills, your input and interactions with health and safety and environmental considerations, and finally, how you play an active role in your community and give back to the profession of chemistry. So you can see that there are wide areas. It's not just about attaining a certain level of technical knowledge. And our chartered chemists, as you can see, Laura has just put on the slide, get the privilege of using this wonderful logo so they can share that they're chartered chemists with everyone. When you're applying for Chartered Chemist, it's important, and this webinar is really to try and highlight to you that achieving Chartered Chemist is more than just getting a sign-off against achieving the skills in the 5 areas we covered on the previous slide. And in fact, there are different elements to the application, such as the nature of the application itself requires you to undertake some self-reflective practice, and that is where you look at your own skills and experiences and you think about how you did it, what you got out of it, how you might improve. You will also conduct a gap analysis and you'll work with your mentor. Every applicant has a mentor, to identify what strengths you have already and what areas do you need to build on. And this gap analysis is a really key part of professional and personal development, being able to really look at ourselves and wonder and understand where do we have skills and knowledge already and where are those areas that we can learn to improve. So this is a chance to review your skills and achievements and your areas of development across the whole professional self, not just your work self. The element around giving back quite often includes voluntary experience, for example, so it's your whole self. And it's a bit cliched, but it's really true in this instance. Applying for Chartered Chemist, it's not just about the destination of becoming chartered, but the journey is so important. And you could look at that in 2 parts. The journey of applying is a great way to refine your skills, and then once you are chartered, it's a great way to go on and develop further. So what can you do? When you're applying for Chartered Chemist, you can identify your goals. What exactly do you want to achieve? Yes, you want to achieve Chartered Chemist, but are there any other areas you can use this application to really develop? We've had members use the Chartered Chemist process to help justify their involvement in extracurricular activities, such as giving back, more interesting outreach activities, let's say, with the support of their employer. Or it could be an opportunity for you to develop other skills and take on more responsibility in the workplace, for example. Work with your mentor to understand what those gaps are and how you might get there and meet them. And we encourage, depending on areas that you want to develop in, you may wish to have a conversation with your line manager if they aren't your mentor as well, so that they understand your objectives and the 3 of you can work together to help you meet them. Sometimes our members are experienced and they feel that they don't have any gaps. And whilst I'm always of the opinion we always have something to learn, if you really look at the chartership attributes, feel that you can meet them all no problem, now is your opportunity to work with your mentor. I've already said every applicant has a mentor, to understand more about those individual examples. What went well? Why did it go well? What were your motivations behind your actions? Have you applied that learning to new areas? And an evaluation piece, how would you do it differently if you had your time again? There is always learning to be had through the chartership process. I just want to show you the 5 areas that CChem covers. They are applying knowledge, professional impact, communication and influence, health, safety and the environment, and giving back to the community. And now I just want to highlight a variety of different skills that you might deploy in each of those areas. So in applying knowledge, you might want to use and draw on your problem solving skills and a whole range of other skills such as analytical and technical skills. But it also covers the use of non-technical skills. You might also be involved in management of projects or people, though that is not a necessary requirement for chartered chemists. Under professional impact, the skills that you'll be demonstrating and bringing to the fore there will be predominantly leadership skills, and they are broken down into these other subsections of operating with integrity, having a respect for boundaries and being able to work within particular confines. And that's important if you're managing someone or you work with clients and on relationships where the work you're doing is fairly confidential. Finally, collaboration and adaptability is key, as is time management. Under communication and influence, you'll be sharing with us how you have developed your presenting and written skills, but then following on from that, your listening and team working skills are very important. Being able to respond and work with feedback, and then finally influencing and networking with wider groups of people. Under health and safety in the environment, the skills that come out here are decision making, taking responsibility, again leadership, but also technical skills. You might have various technical considerations in your health and safety piece. You might be involved in training others, and you have a good attention to detail. And finally, my favourite is giving back to the community, and the skills that you'll be employing here are real self-drive and motivation, again leadership and networking, commitment. Perhaps you have responsibility for some funds and you might be involved in budgeting. Assertiveness, getting people to do stuff when nobody has to do it for their role is a really good challenge and personal development, and being inclusive as well. So you can see that there's a whole range of skills linked to chartership. So we've talked about the application and how you might use that. Now I want to think a little bit about, once you've got the CChem, what then? Well, it doesn't stop there. Through maintaining your chartership award, you must undertake continuing professional development, and we're always on hand to help you with that. However, some other things that you can do include building on the foundations of your chartership application, referring back to it 6 months, 12 months, 2 years from now. How have you developed since then? Perhaps you want to continue working with your mentor, and you can. Chartership is a great way to build those relationships in the first place, and perhaps your mentoring discussions might take on a new slant. You might become a CChem mentor yourself, and this can also help you develop the necessary skills to mentor others in a wider capacity. And finally, you may wish to support others more broadly at your organisation, and you might help your organisation to achieve accredited status with us. So what next? If you are CChem, or if we have any current applicants listening in, when you get there, enjoy being chartered. It's such an achievement. Not all of our members hold chartership status, so really celebrate it. Use your post-nominals. Those are the letters after your name. You might mentor other applicants, and if you do this, you'll be developing leadership skills, listening, and advocacy skills. It's great to build up your confidence, and that confidence will help you both in the work and outside of the workplace with other things you want to do. Again, you can review your progress and think about what you would do differently and how you have changed, and you may wish to discuss this with your mentor or a friendly colleague. You might also think about becoming a fellow later on in your career, and building on chartership is a great way to help you understand what you need to do in order to become fellow in the future, and that is something that some of our members can work towards and achieve. And finally, once you are CChem, that will give you added confidence. It's really hard to articulate. I personally didn't feel too different before CChem and then when I was awarded CChem, but after a little bit of time, I did realise that I had a bit more confidence in the decisions I was taking, in the opinions that I had and the ideas that I had. And that has enabled me to take on other responsibilities and get stuck in with things. You might also wish to become more involved with the FRSC, or indeed any other professional body or work-related voluntary role. So finally, I want to just leave you with this thought for this section, the CChem roadmap. So to begin with, earlier on in your career, before you even thought about Chartered Chemist, you're establishing yourself in your role and your career. And next, you'll be developing those skills, starting to gain experience, and also beginning to become more aware of your strengths and areas for improvement. And hopefully, this is where most of you are now. You've thought about it and you thought, well, I would like to cement those skills and experiences and really catapult them further. So apply for Chartered Chemist. And during this process, you'll be enhancing your self-motivation ability. You will have targeted development against the core attributes of Chartered Chemist, and the process will encourage your self-reflection, which will enable you to learn more about yourself and develop further. Once you have Chartered Chemist status, number one, celebrate. Number two is you will have greater self-awareness of limitations, but also opportunities and how to make the most of them. You will also be able to be confident that whilst you have got your Chartered Chemist, that was a peer review exercise. It's not just you saying that you're good or your manager saying that you have these skills, but it's the weight of your professional body, that peer recognition behind you that said, yes, we like what we see and we think that's worthy of being Chartered Chemist. And finally, the future. However long this takes and wherever it may take you, being a Chartered Chemist will undoubtedly help boost your confidence. It will help hone your own abilities. It will help you deliver more impact in your role because you've got that greater self-awareness and you're able to use your networks more. You may be able to have more impact through greater contribution and be able to influence more widely.
That's great, thank you. I'm going to pass through now to Sarah, who is going to talk about skills and professional development with some insight from our pay and reward survey, which was carried out last year.
Thanks, Laura. So I'll talk a little bit about the pay and reward survey to start with, which is it's a survey that we run every 2 years, collecting data about salaries and pensions, perceptions of the workplace, and importantly about skills needs as well. So it gets across genders, career stages, different sectors, and responsibility levels. So this gives us a really useful data set that we can use to understand what is happening in the workplace of chemical scientists right now and what their future needs are. So this is one of the slides that shows some of the results from the question that we asked about what skills do members feel they need to progress their careers. So this gives us lots of really useful information. In last year's report, leadership, communication, and networking came out on top. Leadership was also top in our 2017 survey, showing that it's a consistent skill that's needed. It's also followed by influencing, decision-making, strategic planning and implementation, technical skills, and project management. These responses are from a wider variety of sectors and stages, so it's really representative of the sector. It's also really important to notice that the balance of desired skills shifts as we move through our careers. So in the early career stages, technical skills and project management are considered to be more necessary to progress, along with leadership, communication, and networking. But as we come into the mid and established career stages, then the ability to influence becomes more important. So you can see some of the key skills here as well. This graph shows how, as I started to talk about before, about the 3 different responsibility levels in our survey are high, medium, and low, and how they relate to skills needs. Leadership, communication, and networking are still seen at the top 3 throughout your career stage and irrespective of the level of responsibility you're operating at. However, influencing skills do become more important here, and then progress onto strategic planning and implementation to progress your careers. That's why it's really important when thinking about skills development and professional development that you tailor these packages, that training and skills development packages are able to offer support to employees at different career stages and responsibility levels, and that professionals like yourselves actively manage your own professional development throughout your career by thinking about and defining your goals, thinking about what you'd like to be better at, and making a plan on how to gain those skills and knowledge. Thinking about or anticipating your future skills needs, and that can also be really useful. And so using the pay and reward survey is one of those sources of information as well. So when was the last time that you thought about your professional development or something that you'd like to be better at or know more about? And then when was the last time you made a plan to gain those skills or knowledge? So from the pay and reward survey, we know that respondents said that often their challenges to obtaining their skills was a lack of time to attend training courses, but also a lack of opportunity to gain experience in the workplace through secondments or shadowing. So it's really important to view professional and skills development not as this extra thing but something that can be scheduled into our workload is often the first thing to go when we get busy. So you can also speak to your line manager or your learning development team in your organization about what opportunities they have for you to develop. And it's also really important to remember that skills development isn't always like a technical training course or just a training course full stop. So think outside the box. And this applies to both technical and soft skills as well. There's lots of different ways that you can upskill yourself. And that could be reading articles or papers, reconnecting with someone from your network and learning a little bit more about what they're doing now. You could all talk to your mentor. There's lots of different shapes and forms that skills development takes. It's not always sitting in a course or in a webinar listening to something. There's lots of ways that you can make it work for you. Next, yeah, perfect. Thank you, Laura. So the Chartered Chemist attributes are a really useful CPD framework, whether you're eligible for the professional award or not. If you don't know where to start with it, then this is a really useful framework. And we know that this is somewhere that members often struggle with how to identify what skills to develop. So this is a really useful framework as it's rigorously tested and it has lots of different competencies that are needed in this sector. It also mirrors many of the skills that are needed, many of the skills that were mentioned in the pay and reward survey, such as planning and implementing work programs, teamwork, communicating effectively with others, and the ability to influence and persuade. So we had included in last year's pay and award survey is a really great quote from Michael Harrington, who works at EDF Energy. So he became chartered in October 2014, and he shared this quote with us about how his chartership journey allowed him to identify and develop his leadership and communication skills, which allowed him to move up into technical management at Hinkley Point C. He said he hadn't planned to move into people management as quickly as he did, but the skills he developed through chartership went hand in hand with the skills required for progression at EDF Energy. And I'm sure this is something that William and Rebecca will elaborate on further. So just to round out, to finish up what I'm saying about, is to here's a couple of ideas about how and where you can develop skills. And some of these are places through the FRSC, but there are also lots of other places where you can develop your skills. As I said before, skills development doesn't have to be a paid for training course or even paid work. Volunteering is a really valuable opportunity because you're still accountable for what you've done, you've learned something new, and you've worked with others. We develop skills every day when teaching colleagues how to share their screen on Zoom, listening to others, supporting and advocating for them, offering out help, or even just finally mastering if statements in Excel. This is all different ways that you can develop skills. There's other ways you can get involved is through webinars like this one, and our ChemCareers series runs throughout the year. You can get involved with FRSC committees or organize events and webinars, which helps teach you skills like project management, communication, negotiation, budgeting, and teamwork. The RSC also has its own mentoring scheme, and we also offer grants for courses and travel and conferences and much more. There's also lots of online learning platforms like Future Learn, Skillshare, Coursera, who offer a range of skills in IT, soft skills, and a lot more. So there's lots of different ways you can deal with this. That's all for me, and I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Sarah. So yes, coming up, we're now going to hear from William first, and then Rebecca, who are going to give us an overview of their careers and obviously their involvement with CChem. So, William, over to you first.
Okay, thanks. Yep, if you want to start on the next slide. So I thought I'd give a quick overview starting from my very early career. So there's a picture of me at school. I went to a UK state school, and I was in the chemistry quiz team. Didn't win, but got through to the regional finals. And then following school, I was lucky enough to get a place at Oxford University, and I studied chemistry there, first as an undergrad, and then I did a PhD. And then following my PhD, I did a postdoc in the US at Indiana University. And so far throughout my career there, I built a very strong background in academic and technical knowledge. And then following my postdoc, I got a job working for AstraZeneca. Now I know AstraZeneca have been very much in the news recently, but I've got one slide now, just kind of a brief introduction on the company on the next slide. So as most people probably know, it's a global pharmaceutical company, which has got a major UK presence. We're one of the few companies that only makes pharmaceuticals for humans, and we do that through exploring the best science and putting patients at the heart of what we do. We have 7 UK sites employing directly 6,700 UK employees, and indirectly that supports 35,000 UK jobs. So I joined the company, and if we go on the next slide, here we are. I joined on our Macclesfield site. This is an aerial shot of the site recently, and this is considered a UK super site, which means it's significantly important for the UK economy. The government takes a keen interest in the site remaining open and what is happening on the site. So it's interesting for me. So I joined AstraZeneca on this site at the start of my career, and had these great kind of technical skills, but I was a little bit blind to the other skills that I could have that would help me in my role. So maybe I've been in my job for about 6 months, and I wasn't a member of the RSC, and I kind of looked into Chartered Chemist and thought about exploring this. So if we go to the next slide. And really it was about understanding, okay, I had these great technical skills, but what were the non-technical skills? Where were the gaps that were less well developed from my PhD and postdoc? So for me, the Chartered Chemist and looking at the attributes as they were at the time was a really useful sort of second reference to kind of think about my early career and think about what skills I needed to progress and how I could develop those. And very similar to some of them which were mentioned earlier. So it was about understanding my leadership, my influencing skills, communication, decision making, and developing professional relationships. And that's not to say that I didn't have some of these skills. It's just I realized kind of through some self-reflection that I could improve on these. So I've got a few mini case studies now just to look at how I developed these. So the first, one of the first projects I was working on, which was a kilo manufacture in our large-scale lab at Macclesfield, where you can see an actual photo from that lab there. And we were working on a couple of different routes. I was working on one route, and a colleague was working on a different route, and I believe that my route was better and had the better potential, but it was very close call between which was better. And I realized that I wasn't very well equipped with the skills to communicate that and influence the other people in the team. And discussed this with my manager, and reflecting on that, I went on a course on learning better influencing skills, and also got a greater understanding that it's important to develop the relationships with people to help make those decisions. And now I've moved sort of from early career to mid-career. One of the key things I do is making decisions on a daily basis, and so kind of what I learned now on my CChem is kind of applicable every day, pretty much. The next example was I was looking for opportunities. One of the attributes at the time was about how you demonstrated trust in your colleagues, being able to handle confidential material and professional skills. So I sought out an opportunity, and I think doing CChem is good for that. It acts as sort of a prompt to kind of seek out and stretch yourself and get new opportunities. And this was as an employee consultation representative in the company, representing 70 colleagues through a period of business change. And it turned out this was an interesting period for AstraZeneca. There was a number of UK site closures. It was quite a lot of emotion and change and confidentiality to deal with. So there was new skills I learned there in terms of communication, influencing senior leaders in the business, and how to communicate and interact with my colleagues. So again, that was really good skills I learned by finding that opportunity through CChem, and think about how to influence senior leaders. Now in my career, I've moved on. I've moved a couple of levels up the career ladder, but I'm still very much in a position where I need to influence senior colleagues, and then sometimes communicate information down to more junior colleagues that might not be that popular. So again, certainly skills that I've developed here and continue to use for my CChem that are very useful. And then for my last case study, one of the attributes is always about how you make a contribution to the profession outside your usual job. And AstraZeneca, we now have an accredited scheme, and we think it's very important that people actually do this outside the company, and the company does support people to do volunteering opportunities. And I was lucky enough to be involved in the co-founding and running a primary school science club for a number of years. This is not actually the science club. I can put their photos in. This is my daughter doing some science at home. But this is a whole different set, because then you're looking at very young people. How do you lead people who don't know about science? And it's different type of communication, different influencing skills, and also developing relationships with the teachers in the schools, and helping them understand what you're going to do and how it's going to help the schools and the children. I guess the learning I've taken from this, I still think it's really important to kind of think more broadly than your job and see what you can learn in terms of your professional skills, and also to help the wider public understand chemistry. And so I'm not actively involved in the science club, but now in my mid-career, I do lots of work with universities and college career days as well. One of the things I did from this was I got involved with setting up the accredited scheme for Chartered Chemist at AstraZeneca. So I think it's going back 8 years ago. A group of us got together and decided that we'd align our company training so we could be accredited to award Chartered Chemist. And I've recently just taken over as the person leading that. And for me, it's a great opportunity to support other people to get the value that I got from my early career, and be able to use that for their own careers. And the final thing I would say is as well is it's about keeping up your chartership. I think Nelly touched on it, that you can get asked to provide evidence and reaccreditation, and I did get asked for that 2 years ago. So I do keep an eye on the attributes, and every time I change role or job at work, I look at the attributes and kind of think about what am I doing to keep those maintained, and how do they apply to my current role. So I'll stop there.
Brilliant. Thank you, William. That's really helpful. And Rebecca, same for you.
So firstly, I'd like to thank the FRSC and Janelle for inviting me to take part in today's webinar. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you all today to give an insight into my journey to chartership and how this helped my career. Next slide, please. So my name is Rebecca Ballantyne, and I'm a senior research technologist at Sellafield, and I became a chartered chemist in 2018. So on this slide, I've included a brief career path showing my career journey from graduating in 2007 with a degree in forensic science through to the present day. So immediately after graduation, I began working for a pharmaceutical company as a trainee analyst before I moved to Sellafield a few years later and into the nuclear industry. My first position at Sellafield was in the Analytical Services laboratories, where I worked as part of a team providing analytical support to site to ensure the safe reprocessing of spent nuclear fuel. It was whilst in this role that I first joined the RSC as a member and MRSC. I decided to go for chartership a few years later after I'd returned from a period of maternity leave, as I felt ready for a new challenge and I wanted to progress in my career. Around the same time as achieving my CChem in 2018, I was successful at interview and I was offered a position working for the strategy and technical team, which supports the Analytical Services laboratory. This was a natural progression for me, as it enabled me to build upon my years of experience working hands-on within a chemical and nuclear environment. So by applying those transferable skills and knowledge into a new area. I've also recently attended another interview for a position at Sellafield, and I've just accepted a position as a business change manager, working in a programme to support specialist alpha skills on the site and further afield across the UK. So as I move on to the next few slides and my chartership journey, the reason for this change in career will hopefully become apparent. So how did CChem help my career? I've decided to break this down into three main areas for discussion today. Why did I want to become a chartered chemist? How did I do this? And what did I gain both personally and professionally from this journey? Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned previously, I decided after returning from a period of maternity leave that I was ready to develop and eager to take the next step in my career. I had worked in the same area for several years at this point, and being based at Sellafield, there are so many opportunities to develop and move into new areas. Now, it's quite interesting, having heard the pay and reward survey results that were discussed previously, as some of the areas that I had identified myself as key aspects that I felt I needed to develop are also some of the top areas identified in this survey. Now, I won't go into each one, but I've pulled out the main topics on this slide, which are shown in the coloured bubbles. I realised that if I wanted to progress and take the next step in my career, that I needed to move out of my comfort zone in order to challenge myself and begin to develop further. Next slide, please. Now, this can be quite a daunting task to face, and it can feel even harder if it's a process that you're unfamiliar with, or perhaps feel as though it's a journey that needs to be travelled alone. For me, the route to chartership provided the opportunities to develop by following this structured programme, which would normally take a 2-year period to complete via the RSC accredited scheme that's offered at Sellafield. Also at the time, there weren't many others in my area that were actually chartered, so again, I felt this would provide me with an advantage. So I expressed an interest in becoming chartered in early 2018, and I was assigned my mentor. As I started my evidence portfolio early, and thanks to the guidance given my fantastic mentor, we felt that I was ready for the assessment after 9 months. So I underwent this early and was subsequently successful. Now, I hadn't actually been in an interview situation for 9 years since 2009, so that is a long time to go without having any interview practice. So I reached out to others who had recently underwent the assessment the previous year, and this really helped me to gain an insight into what to expect. Possibly the most important process I went through involved self-evaluation. Now, this involves being very honest with yourself to identify your own strengths and weaknesses. I learned very early on that it is so important to seek feedback, whether good or bad, as that is how we can identify ways to develop and improve. So my main areas that I felt were weaker were my communication skills, networking and influencing ability. Ultimately, I needed to improve my confidence, which would in turn improve my assertiveness. And I knew that to progress in my career, I needed to overcome this. Next slide, please. So what did I gain from becoming a chartered chemist? I began to challenge myself by putting myself into situations that I had never experienced before that would allow me to focus on those 4 main areas I've just discussed. I reviewed my own career journey to date and assessed what had went well and if there's anything I'd do differently. I look back to my own time at school and I realised that I had no female STEM role models growing up. I always knew that I'd loved science and I wanted to pursue it, but I wasn't really sure what career choices were available or which subjects to even choose. I wondered what impact it may have had on my journey if I had perhaps seen more females working within science, as there didn't seem to be such a lot of them at the time. We were really in the minority. And in the present day, and having a young daughter myself, I'd already begun to wonder if her choices would be impacted at all or limited because of this. So to give back to science, I decided to reach out to local educational providers to determine if there was any call or need for additional science support in schools. The resounding answer was yes, quickly followed by, what can you offer? There was a great STEM network around Sellafield, so I decided to focus my efforts in Carlisle at the north of the county in my hometown to improve the diversity in the STEM areas. For me, it was important that I provided support to children who may not have access to additional STEM support. I decided to use some of my forensics training to develop some fun sessions and small practicals. So the image on this slide shows me working with a group of preschool-age children running an interactive storytelling session based on Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So working with my own daughter, I knew how inquisitive she was at 4 years old, yet the teaching of STEM didn't begin until children were 5. So I developed this session to include some basic problem solving, evidence examination of mini crime scenes using fingerprint powders, UV lighting, hair and footprint analysis, and the children loved it. And when I sought feedback from the school, the comments were brilliant. The preschool had never seen this way of teaching science before, especially to such young children. The natural curiosity and thirst for knowledge at ages 4 and 5 was just so evident. Next slide, please. So encouraged by the success of this, I wanted to develop my skills further. So I branched out to other local primary and secondary schools to deliver more forensic science sessions, and also ensuring that the chemistry content was at the right level. And again, I was keen to work with children who may not necessarily get that external STEM support. So here in the image on the left, I'm delivering sessions at a pupil referral unit, or PRU, for children with various learning and behavioural challenges. Now, I don't have any teacher training at all, so I spent a considerable amount of time researching techniques for working with autistic children. Here I delivered several successful sessions, and after discussions with the head teacher, I was given the opportunity to work with a group of Key Stage 4 girls who become disinterested in education and science, which is shown on the image to the right. I learned that the girls were interested in the beauty industry, and most intended on studying this at college after leaving school. So it was then that I realised, in order to make science appeal to these groups of children, it wasn't only important to be a visible female working in chemistry, but also absolutely essential that the science felt relevant and useful to these groups. And this is where the true value came in designing and delivering these bespoke sessions. So to bridge the gap, I developed 2 two-hour sessions focusing on the science behind the beauty. We discussed the various careers in the industry and also cosmetology, which is the science behind the development of these new techniques. The sessions were really well received, and the head teacher noted that the girls had become more receptive to not only science lessons, but also in other lessons. Next slide, please. So, spurred on by the success of my sessions today, my confidence grew as I learned to cater the content depending on the audience. And with my ability to communicate and present also improving each time, I delivered a session at the University of Cumbria. This was my first experience of guest lecturing. I gained so much from this here, just being put on the spot and asked questions, to providing real-life technical examples of how the skills they were learning at degree level could be applied in the workplace. I also began to deliver inspirational career talks and work with the university's outreach team. I began to gain so much support from my voluntary work in the schools, and I was now receiving direct requests for STEM support. I began to network with various educational providers who had heard of the sessions I've been delivering in Carlisle. I networked further. I joined Women in Nuclear, which is part of the Nuclear Institute. And here they've established this to address the diversity issues in the nuclear industry. And again, I received fantastic support for the work I was undertaking. And here I was offered the position as STEM coordinator for North Cumbria. So the image on the right of this slide shows an FRSC article from the Voice magazine that I featured in. And here I discussed my work, my journey to date, and what I was trying to achieve. This really helped spread the word, and I began receiving offers of support from other females working in STEM roles who were keen to assist, and the momentum was just amazing. Next slide, please. Then, in November 2019, something very unexpected happened. I was shortlisted and then went on to win 2 national highly commended UK awards, with the awards ceremonies only a few days apart. The first was at the STEM Inspiration Awards, where I was commended for my work to encourage equality, diversity and inclusion in STEM. The second was at the Women of the Future Awards, where I received the highly commended award for outstanding contribution to science. This came as a total shock, as I'd never set out with the intention to achieve anything on this level. The experience was just fantastic, and it was a brilliant opportunity to meet so many inspirational women. Following on from the awards, I was given the opportunity to feature in several TV news and radio interviews to discuss the experience, and I used this chance to highlight the diversity issues in STEM and to encourage other females working within STEM to become visible. I was approached by local education authorities to review my teaching with a view to understand if these could be incorporated into local curriculums. All of this I'd achieved whilst working full-time, commuting around 3 hours per day to work and balancing having a young family at home. And then something even more unexpected happened. In February this year, I was placed on the Global Shakers list, which is an international top 20 list of influential women in science. This was just such an amazing achievement and incredibly humbling to see what the other women on the list had achieved. Next slide, please. So the journey to reach this point had all started back in 2018 when I first began my work towards chartership. To look back now and see how far I've come is just brilliant. So to summarise, becoming a chartered chemist definitely helped my career. It pushed me to step out my comfort zone, but it also provided me with the support to do this with the help of my mentor. We are all unique and we all have taken a different journey to work in chemistry. Now, those differences create the diversity needed in our industry because your experiences and drives are specific to you. And that is why your evidence portfolios will differ so much, because they should be a true reflection of you. I'd suggest if you are struggling with a specific competency, that you really take the time to pinpoint your passion for chemistry. For me, I discovered it's all about developing others, challenging barriers, and encouraging others to be the best they can be. Now, my final point is that I don't believe chartership is something you should work towards and then put away in a file or display your lovely certificate on the mantelpiece and just forget about it. It's continuous learning and development. It's a journey that doesn't stop, and you are in the control seat. I couldn't even have imagined where this journey would have taken me when I first began all those years ago. So it's important to ask the question, where will it take you? Next slide, please. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it insightful and useful. I've included some links for further information if you'd like to find out a little bit more about the topics I've discussed today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that insight. Without sort of, I guess, putting words in your mouth, it sounds like starting your CChem was a real sort of catalyst in terms of where your career has now taken you.
Oh, definitely. And it was more the supported structure that came with that. It was definitely more the journey for me rather than the achievement at the end.
Brilliant, thank you. And perhaps if people listening, if you want to start typing in any questions, I've got a couple myself, perhaps starting with you, William. How did you sort of balance, obviously, the time doing your CChem alongside, obviously, home life, you know, your day-to-day job? How did you sort of balance that? How did you find that balance of doing that process?
Yeah, I think really I looked at the attributes and what skill I needed to experience I needed to develop, and then sought out opportunities that could align with my job. So in a lot of cases, it didn't take additional time. It just became part of what I was doing as the main way to do it.
And Rebecca, what about you? How did you balance? You sort of mentioned all the things that you had going on. How did you manage that balance?
For me, it was really about prioritising where the need and the gap was. So with attributes A, B and D, I did feel as though I had quite a lot of good evidence being hands-on in a laboratory. So I focused mainly on C and E, really to try and get that communication and obviously that assertiveness and building confidence. So as soon as I'd prioritised those areas, I was able then to plan and manage my time effectively to meet those.
Brilliant, thank you. Some of the questions coming in are sort of technical questions, so perhaps Janelle, some of these will be for you to answer. A question here around how many years of either industrial or academic experience do you think are needed before you start to undertake CChem? And then as a supplementary part to that question, would you recommend becoming a registered chemist before you do Chartered Chemist?
So I'll start with the second question first. I absolutely encourage everyone to think about applying for registered scientist status, particularly if you're a bit too early for Chartered Chemist, but even if you are ready, the application for registered scientist is a good way to start having those development conversations with your line manager and being able to understand where you need to go next. The difference between the two awards is that the registered scientist work tends to be fairly well defined and you might be involved in some limited problem solving. The difference then up to chartered chemist status is being able to take that leadership, to take ownership and responsibility for things. So if you have got the technical know-how, but you don't quite have the leadership confidence to be able to progress projects and work yourself, it might be a good idea to start building on the registered scientist first and then the chartered chemist once you've kind of built that foundation up. In terms of how many years experience, we have all the requirements listed on our website, and they are essentially we have two routes. One is a 2-year development route for people in the early part of their career. So you just need to be operating at the master's level and to be a full member or fellow even, and then you can apply for the 2-year development route for chartership. If you have 6 years or more experience at or above the master's level, then you can apply for the direct route.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a sort of another question, I think, sort of leading on from that, which is if someone is already a fellow, do some of those, I guess, sort of competencies or objectives as a fellow sort of map onto CChem at all, or do they sort of sit quite separately?
The two are quite complementary, and whatever evidence an individual used for their fellow application can be built on and elaborated a little bit further for the chartered chemist route. They do look at two slightly different areas. For fellow, it's more about impact across a certain sustained period of time at a certain level. For chartership, we're really looking about impact in addition to lots of other skills, as Will and Rebecca have already indicated. So the focus is slightly different, but yes, the two can talk to each other and you can build on your fellow application for completing the chartership in the round.
And just to clarify, someone here is asking whether you have to have a master's degree as a requirement.
No, you don't, and you can find full details about what you need to do if you don't have a master's degree in the chemical sciences on our website. But chartership is there for everyone. Hopefully you'll have seen from William and Rebecca's presentations, different backgrounds, different degrees, different experiences, still getting chartership and still being able to forge great careers beyond that as well.
Great, thank you. Another question around the process and whether there's a sort of a faster process for CChem that's similar to CSci.
So there's the two routes, the 2-year development route and the direct route, and there's no link formally between chartered scientist and chartered chemist. However, whatever people have used for chartered scientist can be adapted for chartered chemist.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think just to finish off, it would be nice to hear from both Rebecca and William. And perhaps Rebecca, starting with you, what advice would you give to someone who's starting out their CChem journey?
I would probably say be true to yourself. Don't feel as though you need to have a specific type of evidence to fit in a bracket of an attribute. As I said in the presentation, it needs to be truly reflective of you. So authenticity shines. So when it comes to the assessment, you should feel comfortable and confident talking about that evidence because it's something that you have done yourself and you've felt that it will meet that requirement, that again, it does fit with your journey and your story as well. The other piece of evidence I would give is to start early, even if this is just a simple A4 portfolio file with some sheets of paper in. That's how I started mine, and that's how I was able to go for my assessment so soon. If I completed some work in the laboratory that I felt was relevant, it was simply a case of printing out an additional sheet and putting it in the file. So when it did actually come to a few months before the assessment, I had a wealth of evidence, and I decided maybe this particular piece of evidence isn't as strong as something else, or maybe this particular piece would fit better in another category. So it really took the pressure off, and it gave me those options to alter things.
Brilliant, thank you, Rebecca.
And just to add to that, Laura, I think that's a great bit of advice. Often candidates might be tempted to submit the first bit of evidence they first thought of at the start of the process, but you will get more out of that process if over the time you're able, exactly as Rebecca says, to be aware enough to highlight new evidence as it comes up, but then have that hard discussion with yourself and your mentor. Which evidence should stay and which should go? It's a bit like putting on an interview suit or your wedding dress. The chartership evidence is showing you in your best light. You want a really good day. So sometimes you may have evidence which trumps the first one and you think, oh, this is brilliant, I will put this in. And being able to recognise for yourself that development is really key to being able to seize development opportunities and other opportunities over your career going forward. It's a skill we often struggle with, being able to identify where we've excelled and why should something stay or why should it go. It's a really important skill, and reviewing your evidence, as Rebecca says, is a great way to help you develop that.
Brilliant. And William, anything that you would add in terms of advice that someone's starting out on their CChem journey?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I'd encourage people to just go for it and to go for CChem and not be daunted by collecting all the evidence. But I think once you've kind of started on that journey and you're working towards your CChem, it's to kind of make your own opportunities. You'll be able to kind of see gaps in your evidence, but you might not often see sort of the perfect bit of experience to get that gap filled. So you should go out there and think, well, what could I do? What can I ask my managers or leaders at my company? How can I ask for their support? And often you can kind of create opportunities to get the evidence. So it's just to kind of really go for it and not be daunted by the gaps, and to kind of push yourself to try out new things.
Brilliant, thank you. And I just want to finish off with a couple of slides, really just talking about obviously the support that is available. Just in general terms around your career and professional development, and obviously CChem can sit within that. As a member, you can get support at any of your career stages, any part of your career stage. We can provide a variety of support. It could be one-to-one consultations. It could be, coming and just having a chat and thinking about, are you ready for CChem? Is it something that you want to start sort of planning for? We also run a mentoring scheme. So this is different to the mentoring of that sits within CChem. So this is much broader than that. So getting some support from a mentor. And obviously there's the networking opportunities that the RSC offers. So if you are a member and you do want to sort of talk about any of these things, then obviously drop us an email at careers@rsc.org. And if you're not a member, then obviously do consider that, think about not only in terms of the career development and the professional recognition that comes with that, but also, like it says here, the sort of the connections that come from being part of the RSC. So just to finish off, I just want to say thank you to everyone on the panel this afternoon. I think what really came across for me, particularly listening to sort of William and Rebecca's stories, was really sort of showing, I think, really what a great tool the CChem framework is to help you start thinking about your professional development, even if you're not at the point where you're ready to sort of formally start thinking about submission. It gives you a great framework. And I also liked Rebecca's point, and actually I think William raised it as well, around this sort of self-analysis and reflecting and identifying for yourself areas that you need to develop. So thank you to everyone that joined us this afternoon. If you have any further questions or want to follow anything up, then again feel free to email us at careers@rsc.org. And thank you all for listening, and thank you to the panel too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.